Welcome back, everyone. Today, we're taking a really deep, structured look at a genuinely fascinating and, honestly, super misunderstood astrological placement, the 8th house Jupiter. You know, if you've ever thought this placement was just some kind of cosmic lottery ticket, well, you're in for a pretty serious paradigm shift. We're going to completely demystify the reality behind it and break down exactly how wealth, timing, and family systems actually intersect. So get comfortable, focus in, and let's decode what the source material really reveals.
Okay, let's dive into this by clearing up the absolute biggest misconception right out of the gate. The myth? Well, it's that Jupiter in the 8th house is this fixed promise of money. Like one day, a giant bag of cash is just going to mysteriously drop out of the sky right into your lap. But the reality is way more nuanced. It's actually a pattern of opportunity. See, this placement doesn't operate as a guaranteed, isolated financial event. Instead, it works through complex family systems, incredibly specific timing, and unexpected goodwill. It's dynamic, not static. It really requires engagement, not just sitting around passively waiting for a payday. So, think about this for a second. What if inheritance wasn't just a financial event, but an actual lifelong process? This right here is the core thesis of our explainer today. We are so conditioned to think of inheritance as a single, static transaction, right? Like a formal reading of a will or a giant check suddenly clearing the bank. But the reality of this Jupiter placement completely reframes the whole concept. It demands that we view wealth as a continuous, flowing process that's shaped by our interactions, our timing, and our invisible support systems over the course of our entire lives. To help us digest this massive concept, we've broken it down into 4 distinct chapters. First, beyond the money promise. Second, sources of ancestral wealth. Third, timing and unexpected rescues. And finally, the hidden emotional costs. All right, Chapter 1, Beyond the Money Promise. Let's look at how wealth here is fundamentally tied to human connection. What's really fascinating about the source material here is the total redefinition of wealth itself. Financial flow under this placement is intrinsically tied to human connection. It is not a purely isolated, pull yourself up by your bootstraps endeavor. You aren't just building wealth in a vacuum. You are actively participating in a multi-generational web of resources. The data points out that your financial stability is deeply woven into the fabric of your family dynamics and unseen support networks. Your net worth, in this specific context, is quite literally intimately connected to your network. Let's move to and see how this builds in Chapter 2, Sources of Ancestral Wealth. Where exactly is all this opportunity actually coming from? Well, the origins of this support are incredibly diverse. First up, financial support is highly likely to arrive from relatives and in-laws, rather than being purely self-generated. Second, family assets and ancestral land. Things like houses, property, or land passed down through generations can become absolutely massive sources of wealth or stability later in life. And third, and I find this one super fascinating, foreign connections or distant relatives. In some cases, the source notes that financial support or inheritance-related outcomes can literally come from across borders, or from branches of the family tree you only ever see in faded old photo albums. The network of potential support here is just vast. And that brings us to Chapter 3, Timing and Unexpected Rescues, because when analyzing this placement, you really have to understand the essential role of patience. So the crucial point is that the timeline of this wealth is incredibly specific. Early in life, inheritance often faces delays or waits for major life transitions. Honestly, if you expect a massive windfall at age 20, you're probably going to be frustrated. But during difficult times, unexpected rescues suddenly arrive. And ultimately, it's later in life that brings the realization of ancestral property and true, lasting stability. Timing plays a monumental role here. The universe is incredibly deliberate about when these resources are released, and it almost always favors maturity and necessity over instant gratification. I want to pause for a second on this very unique concept from the source material, protected inheritance. It describes financial outcomes that arrive in difficult times as support or rescue from family systems. Think about what that actually means for a second. It's not about getting a luxury sports car for your birthday, right? It's about a financial safety net materializing exactly when you need to be rescued the most. Jupiter in this house basically acts as a cosmic failsafe. When things look incredibly bleak, the family system or extended network activates to provide crucial, perfectly timed support. But how exactly does this sudden rescue happen? Well, sudden financial improvements, things like legal settlements, insurance payouts, or resolutions tied to family property matters, they don't just happen randomly out of nowhere. The source emphasizes they're often specifically linked to key astrological trigger periods, like a Jupiter dasha or transit. This brilliantly demonstrates the intersection of practical family matters and precise astrological timing. When the planetary timing finally aligns, the real-world resolutions unlock. Now, let's look at Chapter 4, the hidden emotional costs. We've talked about the financial gains, but now we absolutely must look at the strings attached. Wealth feels like responsibility rather than free gain. And this brilliantly illustrates a deep truth from our source text, completely shattering the illusion of consequence-free inheritance. There are deep moral and emotional obligations intrinsically tied to family money in the 8th house. When resources are handed down, they almost always come wrapped in family expectations, legacy maintenance, or the heavy burden of managing complex and, honestly, sometimes very messy ancestral ties. It is a heavy mantle to wear. It demands stewardship, not just spending. Because of that heavy mantle, managing these shared resources requires a very specific approach. First off, you absolutely must learn to navigate joint finances and partnerships. It's unavoidable here. Second, you have to build absolute trust and transparency. The source is crystal clear on this. Without open communication, joint finances will quickly turn into a nightmare. Master that trust, though, and you unlock the third step: incredible, sustainable, long-term benefits for everyone involved. So, we've covered the diverse origins, the crucial timing, the rescue mechanisms, and of course, the heavy emotional responsibilities of Jupiter in the 8th house. Which brings us to this final powerful question. Are you ready to transform how you understand trust, dependency, and shared resources? The source text leaves us with this ultimate truth. True wealth gain under this placement is never just about external money. It demands profound inner transformation. You really have to evolve in how you relate to dependency and shared power. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive. Keep learning, stay focused, and I'll see you in the next explainer.